Hey guys, welcome to WOW, Word on Wheels. I'm so glad if you're able to tune in this morning. You'll have to excuse my voice. It is a change of climate. And I do appreciate very much your time and your effort to do this. And I hope you guys are enjoying it. I love the feedback uh, that I get. And most of you know uh, I am not overly tech savvy, and so I see you guys chime in, and if I don't respond, it's because I'm focusing on what I'm talking about. Otherwise, we could have a conversation all day long. I do have another engagement I have to take care of this morning in speaking, but I do appreciate you being here. Thank you for your support, and absolutely appreciate getting to get back out when you've done what I do. Isn't it a great time to be self-employed? Oh, you just have to laugh at it. And but next week I will be with some good friends in Elkhart, Indiana. On a I'll actually be there a Sunday to Wednesday, and I'm used to being uh, in the pulpit over 200 times a year, and this year is a little bit different in case you haven't noticed. But yeah, next week I get to be with some friends there in Elkhart, and my friends in Indiana, Illinois, Michigan that are watching. Elkhart is close to Detroit, and so if you guys can make it down, we'll be at, I say we, me, I'll be at at a church. It's called That Church, and I love Pastor Justin Moore. And our website, I had the guys cancel all of the dates we had scheduled because my schedule is totally uh, messed up right now. But and then I'll be going to uh, very dear friends. They're in Jacksonville, Illinois, for a Saturday Sunday meeting, and then I'll be in Dallas area the next week. And so, anyway, if you're in any of those areas, email us, and we'll let you know the address and uh, how to get there, whatever you need. But thank you for all your communication with the ministry. Thank you so much for your support. Very, very much. I appreciate that. That's how I do what I do. And I have never once questioned my calling. Uh, and you guys help support that, and I thank you so much. And if you've never really checked into Mark Shell Ministries, go to the website, and I believe it'll give you a brief description of what we're about. I am all about I am the preacher's kid that got tired of religion. And so I hope that's okay with you guys. But I wanted to share with you today, just for a few minutes, I had some thoughts. You know, a lot of people say, well, I read the Bible. And I do too. But the way God deals with me is, this is the way I get messages. I get messages with a thought, and then I study the scripture to confirm the thought. And I wanted to bring to you today, just for a few moments, on the attitude of gratitude, because a lot of times, especially now, we look at, oh, what have I lost? Look what I can't do. Look what I can't do. But in 2 Kings, the 4th chapter, I was reminded Elijah, he went up from, he went to the widow, and she started hollering at him. your servant, my husband, is dead, and the creditors are taking my sons away from me to be their slave as the debt creditation. And he said, and after she went through all the complaints, he asked her a simple question: what do you have? I think in this time, that you focus, and it's easy to do. There is no condemnation here, but we tend to focus on what's going wrong instead of what we do have. And so when she started complaining, look, I've got this problem, my husband's dead, and I've got all these bills going on. He said, well, what do you have? And I think many times we focus more on what we don't have than what we do have. And I am blessed. I've always told people, I am a positive person, and that aggravates some people to be positive. But I am a positive person. I am going to find some good in anything. Well, Mark, don't you ever see the bad? Of course you see the bad. Of course you see the bad. But you've got to see what you do have. And the prophet said, well, what do you have? She said, I have a little oil in a jar. And if you'll focus even on the smallest good, it will begin to multiply. And then you can go to, 1 Kings 17, when the prophet came up from the brook Cherith, and he went to the widow woman again. And a widow, and we could go, oh my gosh, we could go deep into this. The woman in the Old Testament is your mind. The man in the Old Testament, the woman is your mind. And in the Old Testament, your man is the spirit. And so when a person was widowed, it simply means your mind feels lonely, like, God, where did you go? And so he goes to this woman from the brook Cherith during a famine, and he said, hey, would you give me some water? Oh, yeah, I can do that. I'll give you some water. Oh, and would you make me a meal? She said, I only have enough for me and my son. The meal barrel, I don't even have enough to make you a cake. My son and I, this is our last meal. She was on proverbial death row in her mind. And he said, make me the cake first. In other words, he was a great distractor. And I really believe the older I get, and my friends that know me, I horse around a lot. I'm easygoing, but I really try to distract people from their problems. And so I really enjoy doing that, because we all need a distraction. COVID was a distraction, but I want to be a distraction to your problem. And so she was focusing on what she didn't have, but the prophet told her to focus on what she did have. And so, and you guys that know me, I love to study the psychiatry, the psychology of humanity, and include it in the scripture. And gratitude actually unshackles us from negative emotions. Negative emotions, literally, according to science, affect our hopelessness. It produces that helplessness. It upsets our hormonal balance. It depletes brain chemicals required for happiness, and it does ultimately damage your immune system. And so a lot of sick people, it affects your body. And some of you listening to this, you can look at what you've been going through. And if you've looked and said, look at what I'm going through long enough, that negativity is going to affect you immensely. Yes, you may be struggling. Yes, you may be going through a tough time. But the message this morning is I want to show you how to see good in everything bad, if that's okay with you. Now, watch this. When we begin to focus on what is good in our life, it releases in our neurotransmitters of our brain. God is so cool the way He created us. But He said, okay, when you think about what you do have, then chemicals are going to be released in your body. Dopamine, serotonin. Those two chemicals are the same as modern day cocaine. And so you could literally be on cocaine in the spirit realm, in the psychological realm, if you just stop looking at the little bit of meal, the little bit of oil, and start saying, you know what? At least I've still got some. At least I've still got some. And this took me over. This morning I started looking at something I haven't looked at in years, but in Mark the 4th chapter, and I'll give you the Message Bible translation. I mean, I am, and I've said this multiple times, a little bit hillbilly, a little bit redneck. The redneck doesn't know better, but the hillbilly don't care. And that's kind of the way I minister when you get old enough to do it. But in Mark the 4th chapter, the 35th verse, let me read this to you from the Message translation. Late that day, Jesus said to His disciples, let's go to the other side. And they took Him in the boat, and other boats came along, and a huge storm came up, and waves started pouring into the boat, threatening to sink the ship. And Jesus was in the stern, and He had His head on a pillow, which He was laying His head on the fishing nets. And they started freaking out. He was asleep, and there's a storm going on. How many times in our life have we gone through something and we've cried out, God, don't you know what I'm going through? And that is a very frustrating moment when you start looking at what you're going through instead of what you have. It can be frustrating. And many people have become either bitter at God or they've given up on God because they thought God had forsaken them. Because understand this, the Spirit of God will always make you focus on what you do have, not what you don't have. And so I just released the Spirit of God to you guys today to see what you do have. They were in a storm, water coming in the boat. That was all real. But they couldn't focus on what they did have. And then they realized what they did have, and they woke Jesus up. Now, when's the last time you had to be awakened during a storm? The storm did not wake Jesus up. The people who couldn't realize what they had woke Jesus up. Here's my next question. What are you praying for? Because in today's religious society, prayer is to proverbially wake up, God. Just wake up. Don't you know what I'm going through? And so in the 39th verse, they said, wake up. And he told the wind to pipe down, and he said to the sea, be quiet, settle down. And the wind ran out of breath, and the sea became as smooth as glass. And Jesus reprimanded the disciples, saying, you're such cowards. Can I be honest with you? Oh, that's right. I can. How many cowardly believers are in society? They freak out when things go wrong. They get unsettled. They just close up. They become angry. They became bitter. And he said, now this was his reprimand. Why are you such cowards? Don't you have any faith at all? Faith is reliance on God. Don't you really trust me at all? You can always tell your faith level, not when things are good, but when they're bad. How much peace do you have even in a storm? Well, Mark, where do I get that peace? I'm going to show you. And they were in absolute awe, just staggered at what happened. And they said, who is this guy anyway, that the wind and the sea even obey him? And as Jesus, now watch this, as Jesus was getting into that speaking the peace mode, all the disciples were okay. Now, watch the rest of the story, because a lot of times in ministry, we just preach, oh, and he calmed the storm. Well, then you have to wonder, why did I even have to go through this? I hope you guys are getting this. Why did I even have to go through this time in my life? And the word says, now again, we read a chapter and say that's it. Translators put the chapter and verse in there. The story continues. The word says they arrived on the other side. Oh, that's right. He said, let's go to the other side. If God told you something is going to be okay, why can't you just take it for that? Why do you focus on the storm in the between time? And the word says they arrived on the other side of the sea in the country of the Gadarenes. And as Jesus got out of the boat, a madman from the cemetery tombs came up to him. He was living around dead people in the graves, in the caves. Okay? A cave, now this is still Old Testament, even though it's in the gospel. The new covenant does not start until Jesus ascended, so it's still allegorism, it is still typology. One thing in the physical means one thing in the spiritual. And so a cave in the Old Testament is a mindset. It's your womb, if you will. And so when Jesus got out of the boat, they did get to the other side. The 5th chapter of Mark, the 1st verse, there was a man that came to him. He was a demoniac, a madman from the cemetery. And no one could restrain him. He couldn't be chained. He couldn't be tied down. He had been tied up many times with chains and ropes, but he would just break the chains, snap the ropes. No one was strong enough to tame him. And night and day he roamed through the graves and the hills, just screaming and crying out and slashing himself with sharp stones. Now, a stone in the Old Testament is the law of Moses. How much do you beat yourself up over the law of the Old Testament and you cut yourself? And when Jesus saw him from afar off, and he saw Jesus from afar off, he immediately ran to him, bowed down before him, and he said, What business do you have with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Why are you messing with me? I swear to God, don't give me a hard time. That's the Message translation. And Jesus just said, tell me your name. Tell me your name. I go back to Elijah. What do you have in the house? I go back to the meal barrel. Do you have enough in the barrel? See, anytime we go through struggles, we have to remember at least what we do have and not focus on what we don't. And so Jesus didn't say, why are you acting like this? Why are you a nutcase? He said, identify yourself. We need to start identifying ourselves. No, I am the righteousness of God. I am healed. I am at peace. I am prosperous. I am who God says I am. And so the first thing we need to do to get back into the attitude of gratitude is to re-identify ourselves. Stop letting your problem identify you. You're not a cancer patient. You're healed going through a battle. You're blessed going through a financially tough time. And so he said, my name in the King James says legions, but in the original language, he said, my name is mob. I am a rioting mob. We see that today. Then he begged him not to banish them from the country. The demons did. Don't banish us from the country. In other words, how can we affect people if they don't accept us? And there was a large herd of pigs around, and the demons cried out. I'll give you the Oklahoma, Texas, Red River translation here. And the demons cried out and said, well, at least let us go into the pigs, because they were comfortable living in the pigs. This is the reason in a lot of Orthodox Jewish traditions, eating of pork is strongly forbidden, because a swine never looks up. They only look down. And so to be demonically possessed doesn't mean you froth at the mouth and wiggle on the ground. I mean, it can include all of that. But to be demonically possessed is literally to look at your problem all the time. It doesn't mean you're not going to heaven. You're just going through hell getting there. And the word says he won't leave your soul in hell. And so the demons left him. They all went into the pigs. And the pigs, what'd they do? They ran and fell off into the sea. That's the same sea the storm just happened in. The man was totally delivered. And he went into town, and everybody was like, oh my God, this is the same guy? Yeah, it's the same guy. It's the same guy. You're the same person you've always been, but you have focused more on what you don't have by looking down than what you do have by looking up. And everybody was so amazed that he began to witness his story to them. And soon after, Jesus was leaving, going to go get into the boat and go to another ministry engagement. And that former demoniac ran after Jesus and said, let me go with you. And Jesus said, no, I'm not going to let you go with me, because they're not going to receive me here like they receive you. You go back to town and you tell everybody your story. What I'm getting at is what you're going through is creating a ministry in you. This man could minister to people that Jesus never could have. You've been through things I've never been through. Stay where you are and let people know your story. There is a psychological benefit to telling your story. Don't be ashamed of your story. Everybody has their own identity, and everyone has their own story. And so as and I want you to see this. Well, Mark, why did the storm happen on the sea in Mark 4? Because there's a man in the tombs watching the storm, and he sees the storm calm and a boat come up to the shore on a sea that looked like glass now. And so this man would not have run to Jesus had he not seen Jesus go through the storm. You become believable in your witnessing when you can always find some little good, a little oil, a little meal in a barrel. Jesus wasn't going to the other side to heal the demoniac, but the demoniac got healed because Jesus made it to the other side. The only thing that's going to help you and me, all of us, is to understand there's always something you can focus on that's positive in your life. I remember years ago, and I've got friends in New England watching this morning, but I remember years ago I was in New England, and a gentleman who had had an accident, and his leg, he had a little age on him. He wasn't old, he had a little age, but he had had an accident, and just painful walking, doing anything. And one night he was just miraculously healed during one of the meetings. And it happened to be Pastor Mike's father-in-law. And after the service, the leadership staff and myself, we went out to dinner, and Pastor Mike got a phone call that his mother-in-law and father-in-law had been in an accident on the way home after that same service where he was healed. I believe, if I remember right, it's been 25 years ago, but they had been rear-ended by a drunk driver. And anyway, we rushed down to the hospital, and he's still in the ER on a gurney. They've got him in the neck brace. He's all strapped down still from the paramedics working with him. And he kind of looks over and sees us out of the peripheral vision. And I said, "Pop, how you doing?" He said, "Look, my leg still works." Even though he had been in an accident, he saw what was right, what was still good. I just want to encourage you today, and I took a little longer this morning, but I just want to encourage you. Stop focusing on what you don't have. The storm you're going through, someone else is watching how you handle it. Had the Gadarene man not seen Jesus come through the storm, he wouldn't have come to him for help. We're all going to go through storms. I've had people tell me over the years, "Mark, I just want to get so close to God, I don't have any problems." Well, they call that the graveyard, because you're always going to go through stuff. It doesn't matter what time of life. You're going to go through stuff, but you've got to understand the key note of this message is Jesus said in the 35th verse of Mark 4, let's go to the other side. Has your storm taken your dream of arriving to the other side. If it has, I encourage you, get back on track and realize someone who you can't see right now is watching how you handle what you go through. And so that's how you create a follower in Christ. Not because you give them a Bible tract. If anything aggravates me is when I am traveling and I'll stop somewhere to go to the restroom and there's a Bible tract on the urinal, heaven or hell. It's like, no thank you. And I throw them in the trash like that. And I hate to say it, and maybe that aggravates some of you, but Jesus never scared people with hell. And the reason we've had to revert to getting them saved by threatening with hell is because we didn't know how to handle the lack. We're all going to go through stages of life where it's like, God, where did you go? And you feel like you got to wake up God. Hey, let me tell you something. If Jesus can sleep through the storm, why don't you find a pillow? Why don't you just say, you know what, God, somebody's watching me go through this, and I want to be a testimony to them. I want to be a testimony to them. I remember years ago when I was coming into the Word of Faith understanding, and then eventually Grace and Kingdom. But when I came into the Word of Faith understanding of the message, I taught a message called Fake It Till You Make It. And I was sincere. But as I've grown in the Lord, you really don't have to fake it if you really believe it. And I want you to believe if God's given you a dream, He's given you a passion, it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. But the storm is not about you. The storm they went through was not about them. But God needed a demoniac to see how you can come through the storm, arrive safely, and they'll want to follow you. So much they want to be like you. But they have their story, you have your story, I have my story. So I encourage you today, and I hope you got this. We could go a lot longer and a lot deeper in this, but stop focusing on what you don't have. Focus on what you do. You're going to make it through the storm, and someone is watching you. That's your greatest witness. Not a Bible tract, not a rehearsal of a scripture to somebody, but your story of at least I had this. And as Pop said, hey, I've been in a wreck, but my leg still works. Oh my gosh. I love Pop, but I just wanted to give you that word of encouragement today. So I'm going to let you go. I've got to do something else here in a few minutes, but thank you guys for chiming in. And hey, handle the storm, handle the storm. It's going to be all right. And you're not handling the storm when you try to wake up Jesus. Okay? If He's in the boat, if He's in your life, you don't have to wake Him up. The very fact He's in you means you're going to get to the other side. So anyway, you guys be blessed. I speak blessings over you. And Father, whoever has not been handling their storm, I just speak peace to them. Not to the storm. I speak peace to them. Well, Mark, when's my storm going to end? When the right people can see what you're going through, and you can minister to them, because as you give, it'll be given back to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together. I've always said, if you're having to ask for a blessing, it's because you're not being one. The blessings will overtake you when the storm doesn't affect you. So thank you again for all your support. That's how I do what I do. And if you've never been a partner with the ministry, go to markshellministries.com. Email me with any questions you have. And always look back and see if somebody had a question. So I'll answer what I teach for sure. So I love you guys, and I'll look forward to seeing you next week. And welcome to fall weather. Have a great day.